Through her medicated haze, Ando Ray recognized the hulking monster that loomed before her as the creature who had almost tore her arm from its socket. Raph. Her memory reminded her. It snarled at her as she stumbled past, supported by the arms of a being she had come to know as Leo. The taste of their names was so foreign to her tongue that she had trouble forming the sounds, even if she could hear them in her head. Mike and Raph and Dawn, different from one another, as sweet as sour. But whatever they had poisoned her with had made it almost impossible for her to tell them apart. Were it not for the brightly colored masks they wore, their faces would have been the same to her. Then there was a rat, older than the rest. Judging for his musty scent, he was practically a corpse. They were all men, she was certain. There was nothing feline about any of them, least all of them who had hid their face red. Raph, murder still simmed in his amber eyes whenever he saw her, and if the old rat had not been around during their first encounter, he surely would have killed her. She would have happily extended him the same custody, had they not restrained her and confiscated her weapons. Now, mutilated and sick, she was furious that she was at his mercy. Leo held her upright as she struggled with nausea each step away from the toilet, back to a small, dank dungeon that she was confined to. The stone vault reeked of molded sweat, like a filthy dojo. It contained a jumble of unfamiliar items swarmed about the floor, like so much garbage. The one in the red mask would occasionally creep in like a roach and rummage through the mess, scowling at her when he caught her eye. She guessed it was his private chamber, and she was secretly pleased to have defined it with her moonblood. As soon as she reclined to the safety she had convalesced for the past day and a half, she silently thanked Leo for lighting another stick of incense. For an hour, at least she could breathe the foul air a little easier. She had 1,000 questions about what happened, why they had taken her, and who they worked for, but her language was ugly and unknown to her. Only the old rat seemed to understand her at all, and he would not or could not explain why she had been taken hostage. It did not matter. Whenever he began talking about anything was more complicated than food and hygiene, his dialect became impenetrable, and she fell asleep. To her chagrin, Leo sat beside her instead of leaving, and spoke to her in their strange language again, as though she could understand. She ignored him, and adjusted her wounded arm into a less painful position before reaching for a container of water that sat on the low table beside the bed. It tasted unclean, but she was in no position to complain. Once she drank her fill, she again studied the bizarre figure of her talkative guardian. They resembled Kappa, but not entirely. Their heads were bone dry, and they occasionally ventured near water, which, in the case of at least one of them, was an unforgivable crime. She thought it was odd that their faces bore such a remarkable resemblance to the men of her people, and lazily wondered if they were related in some way. Perhaps they had grown gnarled and stout from dwelling underground, where the old rat had told her they were. Perhaps they had been cursed with unwieldy turtle shells by some cruel and ancient god, and had fled to these tunnels to hide their shame. Perhaps They were yokai. Whatever they are, they were most certainly ninjas, but she had no idea why they had to keep her alive, or how this huge underground complex would have been built in the Utsuyama without her lord's spies knowing about it. It was impossible. Nothing had made sense since she had been snatched underground, and she was too busy and confused for being poisoned to think any harder of it. She finally closed her eyes and drifted off to sleep again, while Leo rambled on.